Oh, well, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all my Animaniacs out there. I'm Jeff Arbuckle, and this is B-Movie Enema, the series. It's Christmas, and to close out Season 2, I felt it was a perfect time to watch To All a Good Night. But I don't do this alone. With me, as always, is Nurse Disembodied. Are you having a lovely Christmas so far, Nurse?
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas, everyone!
Now, be sure to stick around to the end, because after the movie there are some announcements to be made and stuff to tease for 2022. But let's get started by talking about To All a Good Night. Now, you might think that this 1980 slasher was released for December of 1980.
That would make the most sense.
It sure would, but it actually wasn't. It was released in January of 1980. That means this movie, I suppose, was intended to be a Christmas of 1979 movie, either missed the date or was a piss poor movie, I can guess which one it is, and got held over to January and kind of dumped out there with so much trash. So we have a movie that is entirely centered on a specific holiday, gets released at a time that completely misses said holiday, and then gets bad reviews on top of that. Now, there are some interesting people involved here. The director of this movie was David Hess. Now, Hess is maybe a face that you might recognize depending on how much 70s TV you watch. However, most of the people who watch this program would know him best, at least, as the psychotic murderer Krug, who leads the gang of maniacs in Wes Craven's incredibly influential The Last House on the Left. To All a Good Night is the only movie that Hess had ever directed, but 30 years later, he did make a documentary short, which is about how juvenile delinquency in Trinidad was almost eradicated by giving kids steel drums to play. Now the country has an annual steel drum competition that these kids participate in.
That's very cool and very sweet.
It really is. Hess was mostly known for playing bad guys or street toughs. However, he didn't get into acting until his mid-30s. In his 20s, he was a music composer, having even co-written songs for Elvis. His first love probably really was music, as he continued to produce music for movies like The Last House on the Left, Cabin Fever in 2002, and even 1989's Roger and Me, a documentary that served as the debut film by Michael Moore. His final film role was in The House That Wept Blood, which came out in 2016, 5 years after he passed away from a heart attack he suffered as he was leaving a concert he attended. Now, some of the more recognizable movies on his resume were The House on the Edge of the Park, which was directed by Ruggero Deodato, and Swamp Thing. In Swamp Thing, he worked with Wes Craven again and played Ferret, which was one of the goons of Louis Jourdan's Anton Arcane. If you remember the scene in which Swamp Thing gets his arm cut off, that's David Hess who did it and subsequently got killed for being a dick. Now, this movie was written by another character actor, Alex Rebar. While he only wrote a handful of scripts, maybe his best role that people might know him for was as Steve West, aka the titular Incredible Melting Man. That 1977 movie was something that was covered on Mystery Science Theater 3000 and is a pretty fun ooey gooey monster flick. It's also one that is often available for streaming too. Alright, Nurse, we have ourselves a horror movie with a killer Santa Claus. How else should we get into the Christmas spirit around here?
Wasn't there a bunch of hubbub over horror movies with Santa Claus or Christmas horror in the 80s?
Yes, there was. I kind of remember some of that hubbub too. I mean, there was this period in time back in the 80s that seemed like a return to the simpler times of the 50s. And that was pretty much foremost in people's minds. It's a dumb concept, right? But there was this wave of social conservatism that was taking over the country with Ronald Reagan as president. Plus, the people who were making movies and producing TV shows and so forth in the 80s were children of the 50s. And much like what we see in similar movements today, the entire concept that things were better back then was definitely a part of the cultural conversation. And with that came a lot of religious fear-mongering around horror movies and the satanic panic movement. You see, people thought horror movies were perverting young minds and making them killers, much like how rap music was supposedly doing that in the 90s and video games did that in the 2000s. Mix that with the sacred holiday of Christmas and you have all sorts of problems. The primary concern over seeing Christmas and Santa Claus in horror came with 1984's Silent Night, Deadly Night. However, that same year saw the release of Gremlins, which was a monster movie set at Christmas time that also kind of ruffled a few feathers as well. But Silent Night, Deadly Night was met with huge protest and concern trolling around mixing the idea of Christmas and the iconography of Santa Claus with the slasher movie sensibilities.
Seems like a lot of concern over nothing.
You know, it really kind of was. I think there is this general mystique applied to Christmas that is supposed to kind of shut out all of the sad stuff that happens around that time of year and replace it with good feelings and tidings for those who kind of want to put the blinders onto reality. Plus, while you had some people standing up for Santa Claus being something too sacred to be used for horror movies, you also had a lot of people who were butting up against the idea of the commercialization of the holiday as well. Meanwhile, we have the evangelical idea that giving and receiving presents is indeed one of the great things about the holiday. However, I think that has more to do with the politics of that group of people more than anything else.
All that is very strange.
You know, it sure is. But here's the thing though. Christmas as a setting for horror isn't something that was all that new even in the 80s. There were horror movies dating as far back as 1945's Dead of Night that had a Christmas theme. Of course, there was 1974's Black Christmas. 1972 saw the release of Silent Night, Bloody Night. That same year saw a story in the Tales from the Crypt anthology movie made in England called An All Through the House that features, guess what?
Killer Santa?
A Killer Santa. All those passed notice, but the 80s was a whole other thing. And maybe it was the frequency in which Santa was turned into a villain that upset people, or the amount of Christmas horror movies. I really don't know. 1980 had both the movie that we're about to watch and the endlessly enjoyable black comedy Christmas Evil, which was also known as You Better Watch Out. Then by the mid-80s, it seemed like horror was all in on the Christmas time terror. All right, nurse, do you have those stockings hung on the mantle with care?
We don't have a mantle.
Oh, well, do you have them hung somewhere?
Yes?
All right, well, then we're ready for some To All a Good Night. We'll be back after the first act of the movie, but get out your warm blanket, make some hot cocoa, and settle in for some Yuletide screams. I don't think you can often say that you expect a movie to start off with grab-assery leading to reckless endangerment and manslaughter, or I suppose it would be womanslaughter in this case.
This does remind me of that one time in my sorority that we had pillow fights in our nighties and underwear and sprayed each other with water and accidentally made out, and then one of my sorority sisters died horribly.
Wait, whoa there, wait. All that stuff happened?
Some of it.
Which some?
Would you rather be told and have the mystery spoiled, or do you want to just let the imagination run?
Honestly, a little bit of both. But anyway, one of the criticisms that this movie got was how much it seemed to basically copy from Black Christmas. We have a handful of girls who seem to be staying behind instead of going home for Christmas break. We have a handful of personalities and a house mother.
Some of them seemed like weirdos. One of them danced around while talking to her friend.
Yeah, then there's that British girl who is both uppity and also kind of slutty.
One decides to slowly get undressed and slowly dress again in front of the window before she sneaks out with her boyfriend.
Yeah, and I know why.
Oh, do you know?
Yeah, I know some secrets of the biz.
Uh-huh.
Now, first, it's for the guys. watching this movie to see some sultry boobies. Second, it's to allow for our killer to get into position, stab the boyfriend, and be ready to jump out and stab the girl when she finally gets downstairs.
So you're saying it's a real pacing practice in the movie making?
Yes. Anyway, we've got a relatively recognizable leading lady in this movie. Nancy, our good girl, is played by Jennifer Runyon. Now, Runyon was best known for probably exactly 2 roles beyond this mostly obscure slasher. The first is playing Gwendolyn Pierce for 3 years on Charles in Charge. And the second is as the female student at the beginning of Ghostbusters. Peter Venkman, played by Bill Murray, was performing an ESP test, and he took a shine to her, and she'd not be buzzed even though she was incorrect at guessing the shapes on the card he was holding. Meanwhile, the male student in the study was getting some of them right and still got shocked for answering incorrectly. It's a marvelous scene setting up that specific Ghostbusters personality. It's good stuff. Runyon worked pretty consistently through the 80s, but took time off after appearing in Roger Corman's Carnosaur in 1993. She returned in the 2010s, mostly working in genre movies, and one of the movies that she appeared in was 2017's Bloodsucker Jones vs. The Creeping Death. In that, she played Nurse Zarkov. To All a Goodnight was her film debut. She would eventually appear on the soap opera OtherWorlds for about 3 or 4 years, and then hit many of the popular TV shows of the decade too. Now, Nurse, I mentioned that she was in Roger Corman-produced Carnosaur in 1993 before taking about 20 years off, right?
Yes. Are you about to say she is related to Roger Corman by way of marriage?
So, Jennifer Runyon is related to Roger Corman by way of... Hey, wait a minute.
I have a Google machine too, you know.
Well, so yes, she has been married for the past 30 years to Todd Corman, who is the nephew of Roger. Gene Corman is Todd's father. Now, Gene made a bunch of movies with Roger. Gene was the producer for many of the movies in the 60s and 70s, including the Darktown Strutters, which is a fun blaxploitation lady biker comedy. Todd Corman also got into the movie biz by being an assistant director and second unit director on movies like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Jingle All the Way starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the 1989 TV movie The Ryan White Story about a child from Kokomo, Indiana, who contracted AIDS after a blood transfusion. His plight with the disease and the discrimination he got for having a disease that was mostly thought of as a, quote, gay plague, began opening many people's eyes to the disease and how it could affect people of any background. Being from about an hour south of Kokomo, Ryan White was a huge story here in Indiana. Now, for a little while, Todd Corman coached women's college basketball for several teams. He even worked on films while he was doing this. He had his longest coaching stint as the head coach for Loyola Marymount University from 1985 to 1995. He got a job there before he even turned 30. So look at that, dropping knowledge like so many Hail Marys and holes in one.
Those aren't basketball terms.
Yeah, I know, I just kind of froze there and really wasn't sure what to say.
Let's get back to the movie.
Yeah, let's. People are already starting to drop like flies, and there's a weirdo guy hanging around the sorority house. Could he be to blame?
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. You know, there's nothing more romantic than when a guy and a girl are playing their reindeer games and the guy claims his high school wrestling coach used to accuse him of faking it.
I didn't quite understand that myself, but I'm most definitely not turned on by it.
You know what? Me neither. Then, what's the big old lug say? He tells her that all the flirting and chasing around better be worth it.
But she promised it would be.
You know, I'm not so sure that I can trust it just on her word at all. By the way, hadn't these girls and guys ever done the business before? Are they strangers? Are they already boyfriends and girlfriends? This is one of those horror movies that has more interest in getting to the slasher scenes than giving us actual character development. I mean, one is the quote-unquote fastest girl at school and makes her guy chase her down. But then another is waiting to bone the smart, dorky guy who wouldn't shut up about space or something. And then one just kind of dances and sings like a total nut.
I don't think she's all there. Was she the one dancing earlier?
I don't know. I mean, the girls have different personalities of sorts. For example, the crazy dancing one wants to marry her guy because he's rich as all get out and is, I don't know, I guess sort of good at the sex. But that doesn't seem all that different from the other girls. Now, of course, Jennifer Runyon is totally different because she's the sweet and innocent and quiet and, you know, what have you. But the other girls are just kind of different. I mean, one had a British accent and one likes a dorky guy.
One likes to dance around like a crazy person.
Yeah, and she also does goofy voices too. So you see the problem with this movie. It doesn't really have any interest in being distinct in a very engaging way. There is something here. I mean, in a way, it feels a little like other obscure slashers of the era. Two better films than this are He Knows You're Alone and I'll probably get guffed for this, Savage Weekend.
You just want to bring those up because you like Caitlin O'Heaney.
Well, I do. I mean, sue me. But while those movies are definitely interested in getting to the kills and, well, I guess in the case of Savage Weekend, doing all sorts of other weird things too, but in both movies, you got enough character interaction to understand what's going on with the individual personalities filling out the movie. And I can tell exactly 3 people apart in this movie. Nancy, because she's the good girl who seems too good to have boyfriends or drink or anything. There's the dorky guy who doesn't know how to look at the girl in the teeny tiny bikini. And then there's the old handyman guy who prays for the girls.
Yeah, it's like the other characters are comprised of the horny girl, the other horny girl, another horny girl, and then the slutty girl.
Now don't forget the other slutty girl.
Oh yeah, I always forget about the other slutty girl.
Now, we kid. The girls are mostly just forward with their desires. I do wonder if there was an attempt to make the girls more, I don't know, liberated. I have to think the intent of the girl characters was to make them a little more in control of the sexual situations, but in doing so, they make another big mistake.
They're almost too idealized?
Yeah, like they're what the guys want the girls to be like. You know the manic pixie dream girl trope?
Yeah. One could say that I'm the animated embodiment of that exact thing.
What you say?
What? Nothing.
Well, anyway, it's like the early form of that, but because this movie was made in the late 70s, what makes them zanier is that they just want to fuck. Now, all that said, is this all that bad of a movie? I guess technically not really. This isn't quite on the level of the Friday the 13th slashers or even, say, Sleepaway Camp. It's almost there, though. It has a resemblance to the first 3 Friday the 13th movies, but it falls short on giving us people to root for. But it does have that late 70s and early 80s horror charm. And it's kind of a mix of Black Christmas and Friday the 13th. However, it's the worst of both sides of that concoction. The kills are thrust to the forefront, so it spends all the time setting that up, but it's also populated with characters you don't really like. But we have more of these mostly unlikable characters to kill off. So, you know what? Let's get back to the movie and solve the mystery of who the Santa Killer is. And so the Santa Killer is Mrs. Jensen. And you may be trying to piece it all together and try to figure out how we got from the opening with the grab-ass manslaughter to the end with Old Lady Killer Santa. Well, it boils down to one thing.
Revenge!
That's right. You see, the girl who died at the beginning was Mrs. Jensen's daughter. She's getting revenge on the sorority that killed her daughter 2 years before. Now, you'd think, somewhere along the way, someone would have put 2 and 2 together that the house mom was indeed the mom of a girl who turned up dead just 2 years ago.
Bad cops? Bad background checks?
Bad everything. I mean, you'd think the cops would be all over this because why? Well, the head cop was damn sure to threaten the other cops protecting the girls if either of the guys decided to get handsy with the girls.
That didn't last long.
No, it didn't. Immediately, one of the cops hits and sleeps with one of the girls named Leah, and I want to say that I did find out the names of the characters who made it to the final act, but we'll give it a shot here. You have TJ, a jock who Leah or Leia is pronounced like, or it's spelled like Princess Leia. I'm guessing it's one of those. She said that he was rich. Melody was the girl in the sexy-ass bikini that slept with the nerd, Alex. Leah was the real promiscuous one who first slept with TJ and then a cop. And she's the goofy dancing and singing chick. Now Leah was also like my least favorite character in this whole movie. She was a gold digger and she was kind of bitchy to everyone. I feel like her ass couldn't cash the checks her shit attitude was writing.
And she went nutty at the end too.
Yeah, she did. She found a head in the shower and decided to start dancing, singing, and laughing like a goddamn loon. Melody sucked too, but at least she was hot. Yeah, so this did the Friday the 13th thing before Friday the 13th, with the vengeful mother trying to get back at a general group of people that she felt was to blame for her kid's death. Then you have a good girl having to go up against said crazy mom.
How'd you like the airplane propeller kill?
Holy shit, that was rad. Alright, so get this. Melody goes to wake up the pilot of the plane the guys arrived in. He works for TJ's family or some shit. But anyway, one of the propellers won't turn on until it does because he fixed it and Mrs. Jensen was in the cockpit and turns it on to shred the pilot and Melody.
Yeah, blood is spraying at the window of the cockpit and then a chunk of something hits the plane too.
Yeah, it was a good kill for sure. Now, the pilot was played by porno legend Harry Reams. I have no idea why he's in this movie. He just is. He delivers the dudes who are looking to get their dicks wet. He takes a nap and then he's killed. What wasn't such a good kill was Mrs. Jensen's. And I'm not sure what the hell happened there. It mixed with the flashback of the daughter dying. You don't very easily see exactly what happened.
But wait, there's more.
That's right. The head cop is Mrs. Jensen's husband, so both she and the cop were killing people to get revenge. Okay, one thing that was mentioned previously was that this cop went by chief. So was he always the chief of the campus police? Did he just get hired? Didn't someone say, hey, the chief's daughter died in a drug-fueled game of grab-ass. Maybe we should do something about that to make sure he's doing okay?
It's almost as if the writers didn't think all the way through.
You know, I guess not. But anyway, Dorky Alex does what I would have done. Not just killing the bad guy, but also decides just to hightail it out of there with Nancy and let someone else deal with kooky crazy Leah.
I think I really liked this movie.
You know, I was kind of hard on this movie earlier, and I think this movie is much better in the second half than it is the first. As I did say, the charm is there. When the final act ramps up the kills, the chase, the terror part of the horror movie, it really kind of comes alive. The first half of the movie just felt a little more like wheels spinning in the mud. However, it did seem as though David Hess did a fine enough job as a director. He knows how to get Leah's boobs and naked butt in the frame. He knows how to make me want to see Melody's boobs without showing them to me. It's fine. It's all fine. So, Nurse, we're at the end of the second season of B-Movie Enema.
Sure seems like it.
You know, I think we did a pretty good job. What say you?
I was great. You were good too. This was a good season, but you know what?
What?
We have things to announce.
We do. First, tell everyone where they can get the good stuff, and then we'll make those announcements for what to expect going forward.
You can catch all of Jeff's stuff at www.bmovieenema.com. You can follow the site's social media pages at Facebook and Twitter by searching for B-Movie Enema. New articles are released every Friday morning, and you can also subscribe to B-Movie Enema on YouTube so you can stay up to date with each of the episodes of B-Movie Enema the series, as well as see clips from movies that Jeff uses in his articles. If you have a Roku, add the free channel OtherWorlds TV to your apps and check out all the obscure and forgotten films that play there each week. B-Movie Enema is part of a weekend lineup of movie hosts that play every weekend on OtherWorlds, so be sure to check out the others that share the airwaves with this show there.
And I think we should ride off into that good night and put a lid on season number 2 of B-Movie Enema the series. From all of us here at B-Movie Enema Industries to all of you and yours out there, We wish you a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, and a healthy and safe New Year that hopefully will grant all of your wishes and answer all your needs. And to all, a good night.